my uncle left me a key in their will. I don't know what it opens. The lawyer's voice droned on about stock portfolios and real estate holdings, but all I could focus on was the smug smile spreading across my cousin Miranda's Botoxed face. $23 million. That's what Uncle Theodore had left to her and her brother Marcus, the same cousins who'd spent the last 5 years barely visiting him except when they needed money for their trust fund lifestyle. And to Sarah Elizabeth Chen, Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the fluorescent light of his downtown office. Theodore Blackwood leaves the following. I sat up straighter in the uncomfortable leather chair, my paint-stained fingers gripping my thrift store purse. Maybe there was something. A small inheritance, enough to cover my overdue rent, or perhaps some of his art supplies from the studio he'd maintained in his Beacon Hill mansion. Miranda leaned forward, her Cartier bracelet clinking against the mahogany table. Marcus straightened his Armani tie, both of them probably expecting to hear about some token gesture, maybe Uncle Theodore's old easel or a minor piece from his collection. One antique brass key, circa 1890, with ornate scrollwork and the initial T engraved on the head. The silence in the room was deafening. Mr. Whitmore reached into a velvet pouch and placed the object on the table between us. The key was beautiful, I'll give it that, about 4 inches long with intricate Victorian metalwork that caught the light like tiny golden flames. But it was still just a key. That's it? Miranda's voice pitched higher, though she was trying to contain her glee. A key? According to Mr. Blackwood's specific instructions, yes. The will states that this key belonged to his grandfather, Edmund Blackwood, and should go to the family member who understands the true value of art and creation. I felt heat creep up my neck. Even in death, Uncle Theodore was reminding everyone that I was the family disappointment. The art school dropout who waited tables at a cafe in Somerville and lived in a studio apartment with walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's every phone call. Meanwhile, Miranda had her MBA from Wharton and Marcus ran some tech startup that Daddy's connections had funded. Well, Marcus said, not bothering to hide his smirk, I suppose it's sentimental? I picked up the key, surprised by its weight. The metal was warm, as if it had been sitting in sunlight instead of a lawyer's safe for the past month since Uncle Theodore died. The scrollwork was even more detailed up close, tiny roses and vines that seemed to move in my peripheral vision. Do we know what it opens? I asked, my voice smaller than I'd intended. Mr. Whitmore shuffled through his papers. I'm afraid Mr. Blackwood didn't specify. He only mentioned that you would know what to do with it when the time comes. Miranda stood, smoothing her designer skirt. Well, this has been illuminating. Marcus, we should discuss the estate transfer timeline. She grabbed her Hermes bag and paused at my chair. Sarah, I'm sorry it wasn't more substantial. Maybe you could make some kind of art piece with it? You know, upcycling or whatever you artistic types do. The condescension in her voice made my jaw clench, but I just nodded and slipped the key into my jacket pocket. As they swept out of the office discussing property taxes and investment portfolios, I remained seated, staring at the empty velvet pouch. Uncle Theodore had always been cryptic, but this felt different. Deliberate. The key burned against my palm during the entire tea ride back to Somerville. I couldn't stop turning it over, studying the intricate metalwork that seemed to shift and change each time I looked at it. The T engraved on the head wasn't just any letter, it was ornate, almost calligraphic, surrounded by what looked like tiny paintbrushes and palette knives worked into the design. Back in my cramped studio apartment, I dumped the contents of my junk drawer onto my kitchen table, old receipts, broken jewelry, takeout menus, and 3 other keys I'd accumulated over the years. None of them looked anything like Uncle Theodore's gift. This key was clearly meant for something substantial, something important. I pulled out my laptop and started Googling Edmund Blackwood Boston 1890. The search results were sparse, but I found a few mentions in historical society records. Edmund Blackwood had been an art collector and patron in the late 1800s, known for supporting local artists and maintaining a private gallery. He died in 1923, leaving behind what one article called a legendary collection that mysteriously vanished. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jess, asterisk how the will reading go? Please tell me you got enough to quit that soul-sucking cafe job, asterisk. Got a key, I typed back. That's it. Asterisk a key to what? Asterisk. Asterisk no clue. Miranda and Marcus got $23 million, asterisk. Asterisk those vultures. I'm bringing wine, asterisk. I set the phone aside and kept researching. There had to be something I was missing. Uncle Theodore never did anything without purpose, especially when it came to the family. He'd watched from the sidelines as my parents pushed me toward practical careers, as my cousins climbed social ladders with family money, as everyone wrote off my artistic ambitions as a phase I'd outgrow. But he'd never said anything. Not once had he offered support or encouragement, at least not directly. When I dropped out of art school after my parents cut off tuition, he'd been conspicuously silent. When I'd started waiting tables to pay for paint supplies, he'd never offered help. I'd always assumed he was disappointed in me too, just too polite to say so. So why leave me anything at all? I was still staring at search results when Jess knocked. She let herself in with the spare key, carrying a bottle of cheap Merlot and Thai takeout. Okay, show me this mysterious inheritance, she said, setting the wine on my counter. I held up the key. Jess whistled low. Damn, that's gorgeous. Looks expensive too. Maybe you could sell it? And fund my art career for what, a month? No, there's something else going on here. I pulled up the article about Edmund Blackwood on my laptop. Look at this. Uncle Theodore's grandfather was an art collector. What if this key opens something in the family estate? You mean the estate your cousins just inherited? Exactly. The idea was forming as I spoke. What if there's something hidden in that house? Something Uncle Theodore wanted me to find? Jess poured wine into 2 mismatched mugs, my only clean glasses. Sarah, that's a massive house. And your cousins aren't exactly going to let you wander around playing treasure hunt. Miranda mentioned they're handling estate transfer stuff. That could take weeks. And I still have Uncle Theodore's memorial service on Saturday. I'll be in the house anyway. This sounds like the beginning of a very bad idea. I took a long sip of wine, feeling the first spark of determination I'd had in months. Maybe. But it's the only idea I've got. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, typical Boston weather that matched my mood as I stood on the steps of Uncle Theodore's Beacon Hill mansion. The house loomed above me, all red brick and black shutters, looking exactly like old money was supposed to look. I'd only been here a handful of times as a kid, mostly for stilted family dinners where I'd been lectured about my potential while Miranda and Marcus charmed the adults. The key felt heavy in my blazer pocket as mourners filed past me into the house. Most were Uncle Theodore's contemporaries, museum board members, gallery owners, other collectors who spoke in hushed tones about such a loss to the arts community. I recognized a few faces from newspaper society pages, people who probably hadn't spoken to my uncle in years but wouldn't miss the social event. Sarah. Miranda's voice cut through the crowd like a knife through silk. She glided over in a perfectly appropriate black Chanel suit, her grief as carefully applied as her makeup. I'm so glad you could make it. Theodore would have wanted you here. The fake warmth in her voice made my skin crawl, but I managed a nod. It's a beautiful service. We spared no expense. Theodore deserved the best. She gestured toward the main parlor where a string quartet played something somber and expensive. The catering alone cost $12,000, but you know how he loved entertaining. I followed her inside, scanning the rooms with new eyes. The house was exactly as I remembered, oil paintings covering every wall, Persian rugs that probably cost more than my annual income, furniture that belonged in museums. But now I was looking for something specific. Where would a Victorian-era key fit in this maze of luxury? Marcus appeared beside us, balancing a plate of catered appetizers that probably cost $50 each. The real estate agent thinks we can list by next month, he said quietly to Miranda. Market's hot right now for historic properties. We might get 38, maybe 40 million. My stomach dropped. They were selling everything. If Uncle Theodore had hidden something here, I had weeks at most before it disappeared forever into some other wealthy family's hands. Excuse me, I murmured, slipping away from their conversation about square footage and property taxes. I wandered through the house, nodding politely at other mourners while mentally cataloging possibilities. The key was substantial enough for a door, but I didn't see any locked rooms. Maybe a desk drawer? A jewelry box? Some kind of cabinet or chest? In Uncle Theodore's study, I paused in front of his massive mahogany desk. The walls were lined with art books and auction catalogs dating back decades. Above the fireplace hung a portrait of Edmund Blackwood himself, a stern Victorian gentleman with Theodore's same sharp cheekbones and dark eyes. He stared down at me with what might have been approval or judgment. It was hard to tell with old portraits. Magnificent collection, isn't it? I turned to find an elderly woman studying the bookshelves. She was tiny and elegant, with silver hair pinned in a perfect chignon and pearls that looked like they'd been handed down through generations. Did you know my uncle well? I asked. Theodore and I served on the Museum of Fine Arts board together for 20 years. I'm Catherine Whitfield. She extended a gloved hand. You must be Sarah. He spoke of you often. That surprised me. He did? Oh yes. He was quite proud of your artistic pursuits. Said you had real talent, unlike those cousins of his who wouldn't know a Monet from a macaroni painting. Her eyes twinkled with mischief. He may not have said it directly, dear, but Theodore believed in you. He had particular feelings about how the family treated your ambitions. Something cold settled in my chest. What do you mean? But before Catherine could answer, Miranda's voice rang out from the hallway, calling everyone to gather for the eulogy. The moment shattered, and Catherine patted my arm gently before moving toward the parlor with the other guests. I stayed behind for a moment, staring up at Edmund Blackwood's portrait and wondering what Uncle Theodore had really thought about my family's disappointment in me. And more importantly, what he'd wanted me to discover. The memorial service dragged on for another hour, filled with carefully rehearsed speeches about Uncle Theodore's generous spirit and dedication to the arts. I noticed how Miranda and Marcus positioned themselves prominently near the podium, accepting condolences like they'd been devoted caretakers instead of the opportunistic vultures I knew them to be. When Catherine Whitfield approached the microphone, her voice carried a weight that silenced the room completely. Theodore Blackwood was a man who understood that true art requires both vision and courage, she began, her eyes finding mine across the crowd. He believed that talent should be nurtured, not crushed by those who mistake conformity for success. In his final months, Theodore often spoke about legacy, not the kind measured in bank accounts, but the kind that lives on through creation and beauty. Her words felt pointed, almost deliberate. Several guests nodded appreciatively, but I noticed Miranda's jaw tighten slightly. Marcus checked his Rolex with barely concealed impatience. After the service, as mourners began filtering out into the drizzling afternoon, I lingered near the study. This might be my only chance to explore the house before my cousins locked it up tight. The key seemed to pulse in my pocket, warm against my fingers. I was pretending to examine a first edition art history book when I heard Miranda's voice from the hallway, sharp with annoyance. I don't care what he said at the end, Marcus. Senile old man was probably hallucinating from the morphine. The will is legal, and we have what we need. Keep your voice down, Marcus hissed. People are still here. Mrs. Chen is asking too many questions. Did you see how she was lurking around during the service? And that Whitfield woman practically gave a speech about Theodore's true intentions. I don't like it. My blood turned to ice. Mrs. Chen, that was me. They were talking about me. Sarah's harmless, Marcus said dismissively. She got a key to nothing. Let her play Nancy Drew if it makes her feel better. In 6 weeks, this place will be sold and we'll never have to see her again. I want the locks changed Monday morning. And I'm having Whitmore send her a formal letter stating she has no claim to anything else in the estate. Theodore may have felt guilty about something, but guilt doesn't override legal documents. Their footsteps moved away toward the front door, leaving me pressed against the study wall with my heart hammering. Guilty about something. What did that mean? I waited until I heard the front door close and car engine start before emerging from my hiding spot. Most of the catering staff were packing up in the kitchen, and the house felt eerily quiet. This was my chance. I pulled out the key and really studied it for the first time in good light. The scrollwork was even more intricate than I'd realized, not just roses and vines, but tiny figures woven into the pattern. Artists at easels. Hands holding paintbrushes. And around the base of the T, what looked like numbers, 1-8-9-0. A year? A combination? An address? I moved through the study systematically, testing the key on every drawer and cabinet, but nothing fit. The library yielded the same results. Frustrated, I headed upstairs to Uncle Theodore's bedroom, though I felt like I was violating his privacy. His personal quarters were simpler than the public rooms, still elegant, but more lived in. A book of poetry lay open on his nightstand. Reading glasses sat folded on top of financial documents. And on his dresser, a photograph I'd never seen before, Uncle Theodore, maybe 20 years younger, standing next to a young woman with paint-stained fingers and wild curly hair. The woman looked exactly like me. I picked up the frame with shaking hands. On the back, in Uncle Theodore's careful script, Sarah's mother, age 24, in her studio. Before she chose security over dreams. My mother had been an artist. The photograph trembled in my hands as 28 years of family history rearranged themselves in my mind. My mother, the pragmatic accountant who pushed me toward stable careers and rolled her eyes at my art supplies cluttering the kitchen table, she'd been an artist. She'd had a studio. I sank onto Uncle Theodore's bed, staring at the woman in the photo who looked like she could have been my twin. The paint-stained fingers, the wild hair, even the way she held her head slightly tilted when she smiled. How had I never known this? Before she chose security over dreams. Uncle Theodore's handwriting seemed to mock me from the frame. Is that what he thought I was doing? Working at the cafe, painting only on weekends when I was too exhausted to be creative? Had I become exactly what my mother had become, someone who abandoned art for survival? My phone buzzed. Jess, asterisk, how's the memorial? Any key revelations? See what I did there? Asterisk. I typed back, asterisk found something. Can't talk now. Come over tonight, asterisk. I needed to focus. The photograph was a revelation, but it wasn't what the key opened. I slipped it back onto the dresser and continued my search, moving methodically through Uncle Theodore's bedroom furniture. Nothing. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made me freeze. Heavy, measured steps, definitely male. Marcus, probably coming to collect valuables or important documents. I slipped behind the bedroom door just as he reached the landing. Told you, the Rothko alone is worth $3 million, he was saying into his phone. We'll have Sotheby's assess everything next week before the estate sale. Estate sale. They were selling Uncle Theodore's art collection, the collection he'd spent 60 years building, the paintings and sculptures I'd admired as a child during those rare family visits. My chest tightened with anger. These pieces would end up scattered to private collectors who'd probably never even display them. Marcus moved past the bedroom toward what I remembered being Uncle Theodore's private office, a smaller room he'd always kept locked during family gatherings. I waited until I heard him shuffling papers, then crept out of the bedroom and down the hallway in the opposite direction. The third floor had always been off limits when I was young. Storage and old things, Miranda had said dismissively when I'd asked about it once. But now, standing at the foot of the narrow staircase, I wondered what kinds of old things a family like the Blackwoods stored. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed toward what felt like the house's secrets. At the top, a long hallway stretched toward the back of the house, lined with closed doors. The air smelled dusty and unused, like no one had been up here in years. I tried the first door, a linen closet filled with sheets that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The second opened onto a room full of furniture covered in white sheets, looking like ghosts in the dim light filtering through grimy windows. The third door was locked. My pulse quickened as I pulled out the key. It slid into the old brass lock like it had been waiting for this moment for decades. The mechanism turned with a satisfying click that seemed to echo through the empty hallway. Inside was a time capsule. The room was set up as an artist's studio, complete with easels, canvases, and wooden tables covered with dried paint palette remnants. Natural light streamed through large north-facing windows that someone had obviously positioned for optimal painting conditions. But everything was covered in dust, as if the artist had simply walked away one day and never returned. On the main easel sat a half-finished portrait of a young woman who looked startlingly familiar. It took me a moment to realize I was looking at my mother again, but this time captured in oils with loving, careful brushstrokes. Uncle Theodore had been painting her. But it was the wall behind the easel that made me gasp out loud. Dozens of my own paintings covered every inch of available space. My paintings. Paintings I'd never seen before, but unmistakably mine. I stumbled closer to the wall, my hands shaking as I recognized my own brushwork, my color choices, my signature style. But these weren't copies, they were originals I'd never created. Or at least, I couldn't remember creating them. The dates in the corners made my knees weak. S. Chen, 2019. S. Chen, 2020. S. Chen, 2021. Years when I'd been struggling to afford canvas, when I'd been painting on cardboard and old pieces of wood because art supplies were a luxury I couldn't justify. In the center of the collection hung a landscape that took my breath away, a view of Boston Common in autumn that captured light and shadow in ways I'd only dreamed of achieving. The technique was mine, but elevated somehow, as if I'd had access to the finest materials and unlimited time to perfect every detail. Below it, an envelope was tacked to the wall with my name written in Uncle Theodore's careful script. Inside, I found a letter dated 3 months ago, just weeks before his death. My dear Sarah. Asterisk if you're reading this, then you found what your mother never could, the courage to unlock what was always meant for you. This studio belonged to her first, though she abandoned it when your father convinced her that art was an impractical dream. I've kept it exactly as she left it, hoping someday she might return to finish what she started, asterisk. Asterisk she never did. But you have her gift, perhaps even stronger than hers ever was, asterisk. Asterisk for the past 6 years, I've been commissioning pieces from you through intermediaries. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, who contacted you about private collectors. Mr. James Morrison, who claimed to represent emerging artist investment funds. The gallery opening in Newberry Street that mysteriously sold 3 of your pieces to anonymous buyers. Asterisk. Asterisk that was me, Sarah. All of it, asterisk. Asterisk I couldn't bear to watch another generation of artistic talent crushed by this family's obsession with conventional success. Your parents meant well, but they turned away from beauty once, and I watched creativity die in your mother's eyes. I refuse to let it happen to you, asterisk. Asterisk the paintings on these walls represent your true capabilities when you're not worried about rent money or whether you can afford decent brushes. I had them all professionally photographed and documented. The art world knows your work better than you realize. Asterisk. I had to stop reading and sit down heavily on a paint-splattered stool. 6 years. Uncle Theodore had been secretly supporting my art career for 6 years, buying my work through fake buyers, giving me just enough money to keep painting without ever letting me know it was him. Every mysterious sale that had kept me afloat when I was ready to give up. Every unexpected commission that had come through just when my bank account hit zero. Every gallery owner who'd claimed some private collector was interested in my work. It had all been Uncle Theodore. I kept reading through tears I didn't realize were falling. Asterisk. But Miranda and Marcus learned about my purchases 6 months ago. They'd been monitoring my finances, claiming concern for my mental state while systematically cutting me off from friends and advisors who might have questioned their influence. They convinced my doctor to increase medications that left me confused and compliant. They intercepted calls and emails, told people I was no longer taking meetings. Asterisk. Asterisk. In my clearer moments, I tried to change my will, but they'd already convinced Whitmore I was incompetent. The documents they presented were forgeries, but legally executed while I was too medicated to understand what I was signing. Asterisk. Asterisk. This key was my only option. Everything they stole from you, your inheritance, your grandmother's jewelry, the gallery I planned to deed to you, it's documented in the safe behind your mother's portrait. But more than that, I've been building a case against them for elder abuse and fraud. All the evidence is there, waiting. Asterisk. Asterisk. You were never the family disappointment, Sarah. You were the only one who inherited what truly mattered, the ability to create beauty in a world that often forgets its value. Don't let them make you believe otherwise. Asterisk. Asterisk. Fight for what's yours. Fight for what should have been your mother's. And most of all, keep painting. Asterisk. Your loving Uncle Theodore. The letter fell from my numb fingers as footsteps thundered up the stairs. Heavy, angry footsteps that could only belong to Marcus. Sarah. His voice echoed through the hallway, sharp with fury. What the hell are you doing up here? I shoved the letter into my pocket and moved toward my mother's unfinished portrait, my heart hammering as I searched for any sign of a hidden safe. Behind me, Marcus's footsteps grew closer, and I could hear him checking doors, his voice growing more agitated. The catering staff said they saw you come upstairs. This area is off limits. You have no right. He appeared in the studio doorway and stopped dead, his face going pale as he took in the wall of paintings, the easels, the obvious signs that this room had been in recent use. What is this place? He whispered, but his expression told me he already knew. That's when I noticed the small lever hidden in the frame of my mother's portrait, disguised as part of the ornate molding. And that's when Marcus pulled out his phone and started dialing, his voice tight with panic. Miranda, we have a problem. A big one. You need to get back here right now. I pressed the hidden lever before Marcus could stop me. The portrait swung open like a door, revealing a wall safe with a digital keypad. But Marcus was already moving, crossing the studio in 3 long strides with his phone pressed to his ear. Don't you dare touch that, he snarled, ending his call. Step away from the safe, Sarah. Now. Or what? The words came out steadier than I felt. You'll call security on your own family member? You're trespassing. This house belongs to Miranda and me now. His voice had taken on the same cold authority I remembered from childhood, when he'd exclude me from family games or convince the adults I was being dramatic about something. Whatever Theodore hid up here, it doesn't belong to you. I kept my body positioned between him and the safe, my mind racing. The keypad was waiting for a code, and I had those numbers from the key, 1-8-9-0. But I needed time Marcus clearly wasn't going to give me. Interesting setup he had here, I said, gesturing toward the paintings covering the walls. Looks like Uncle Theodore was more involved in my art career than you knew. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he scanned the collection, taking in the dates, the obvious signs of recent activity. I watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding to something that looked like genuine fear. How long have you known about this? He asked. Known about what, exactly? That Uncle Theodore believed in my work? That he saw potential where the rest of the family saw failure? I pulled out my phone and snapped a quick photo of the wall. Or are you asking about something else? Delete that photo. Why? Afraid someone might realize Uncle Theodore wasn't the senile old man you've been describing to his lawyers and doctors? Marcus went very still. What did he tell you? Enough. I was bluffing, but something in his reaction told me I was close to something important. He left me more than just a key, Marcus. He left me documentation. Car doors slammed outside, followed by the sound of rapid footsteps on the front stairs. Miranda's voice carried up from the main floor, sharp and commanding. Where are they? 3rd floor studio, Marcus called back, his eyes never leaving mine. And she's found the safe. I heard Miranda taking the stairs 2 at a time, her heels clicking against the wood like gunshots. This was my only chance. I spun toward the keypad and entered 1-8-9-0, praying Uncle Theodore had used the same numbers that decorated his key. The safe clicked open just as Marcus lunged toward me. Inside were 3 thick manila folders and a small velvet box. I grabbed everything, clutching the documents against my chest as Marcus tried to wrestle them away from me. Give me those, he growled, his expensive suit rumpled from our struggle. What's in them that has you so scared? Miranda appeared in the doorway, her perfect composure cracking as she took in the scene, the open safe, the struggle over documents, the wall of paintings that proved Uncle Theodore had been far more aware and active than they'd claimed. Marcus, let her go, she said quietly. Sarah, those documents are private family business. Funny thing about family business, I panted, still clutching the folders. I'm family too. Miranda's laugh was sharp and bitter. Are you? Because Theodore certainly didn't treat you like family when he was alive. No college fund, no job opportunities, no help when you were struggling to make rent. He watched you wait tables and live in that pathetic apartment without lifting a finger. Her words hit like physical blows because they were true. Or at least, they had seemed true until an hour ago. But he was helping me, I said, my voice stronger now. Through intermediaries. 4 years. Prove it, Miranda challenged, stepping fully into the room. Show me documentation of any direct financial support from Theodore to you. Bank transfers, checks, anything with both your names on it. She was calling my bluff, and we both knew it. The letter mentioned commissions and anonymous buyers, but I had no proof Uncle Theodore was behind them. Just his word in a letter they could easily claim was fabricated. But then I remembered Catherine Whitfield's words from the memorial, asterisk, he spoke of you often. He was quite proud of your artistic pursuits, asterisk. And Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, who'd first contacted me about selling my work 3 years ago. I'd found her name through a gallery referral, but what if I'd never thought to verify her story about representing private collectors? I pulled out my phone with my free hand. Mrs. Hartwell should be able to clear this up. You know, my art dealer? The one who's been buying my pieces for years? Miranda and Marcus exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know. Sarah, Miranda said carefully, I think you should sit down. I ignored Miranda's suggestion to sit down and kept my phone raised. Actually, let me call her right now. I'm sure she'd love to hear about Uncle Theodore's memorial service. Sarah, don't, Marcus started, but I was already scrolling through my contacts. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell's number went straight to a disconnected line message. I tried twice more, my stomach sinking with each automated response. The woman who'd been my primary art dealer for 3 years, who'd sold over 40 of my pieces to discerning private collectors, had a phone number that no longer existed. Having trouble reaching her? Miranda's voice dripped false sympathy. That's so strange. Almost like she never existed in the first place. I clutched the manila folders tighter against my chest. You're lying. Am I? Tell me, Sarah, did you ever meet Mrs. Hartwell in person? Ever visit her gallery? Or did she always conduct business through email and bank transfers? My mouth went dry. Every interaction with Eleanor Hartwell had been digital or over the phone. She'd always had perfectly reasonable explanations. She traveled frequently for acquisitions. Her gallery space was being renovated. She preferred to let the artwork speak for itself rather than complicate things with personal relationships. Marcus hired an actor, Miranda continued, settling against the doorframe like she was enjoying herself. Very professional woman, great voice work. She played Mrs. Hartwell for 3 years, along with about 6 other fake art dealers and collectors. Cost us nearly $200,000 in commissions, but it kept you painting instead of giving up and getting a real job. The folder slipped slightly in my sweating palms. Us? You knew about this? Who do you think suggested it? Miranda examined her manicured nails with practiced boredom. Theodore was getting sentimental about you in his old age, kept talking about wasted talent and family obligations. So we gave him a solution. Let him fund your little hobby through fake sales, keep you distracted and grateful, and everyone wins. But the letter says you tried to stop him. What letter? Marcus interrupted, stepping closer. Sarah, you're not making sense. Are you feeling all right? This is a lot of stress, finding out about Theodore's charitable activities. They were gaslighting me, and they were good at it. For a moment, I almost doubted what I'd read in Uncle Theodore's letter. But the weight of the folders in my arms reminded me that whatever was in these documents had scared them enough to chase me up here. If it was just charity, I said slowly, then why do you care what's in this safe? Miranda's composure flickered for just a second. We don't care. We're concerned about you, that's all. Theodore's death has been hard on everyone, and you're clearly looking for meaning where there isn't any. I backed toward the window, putting more distance between us and the safe. Then you won't mind if I take these documents to examine them properly. Family business, like you said. Actually, Marcus said, his voice hardening, those documents contain sensitive financial information. Bank account numbers, investment details, social security numbers. Taking them off the premises would be identity theft. Funny how it's suddenly identity theft when it's my family's information. Your family? Miranda laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Sarah, honey, you've been the charity case of this family for years. Theodore felt guilty because your mother gave up her art dreams, so he threw money at you to assuage his conscience. But you were never really part of the business side of things. She gestured around the studio dismissively. This little art room? He kept it as a shrine to your mother's failure. All those supplies, the easels, the perfect lighting, she abandoned it all when she chose to marry your father and be practical. Theodore never got over what he saw as a waste of talent. So he decided not to waste mine, I shot back. He decided to enable your delusions, Marcus corrected. Do you know what your paintings actually sell for on the real market? The few pieces that have made it into legitimate galleries? I didn't want to hear the answer, but his smile told me he was going to give it anyway. $50 to $300. That landscape you're so proud of from the Newberry Street showing? It sold for $85 to a college student who liked the colors. The words hit like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stay focused on what mattered. Whatever was in these folders had them scared enough to follow me up here and orchestrate this whole psychological warfare session. If my art is so worthless, I said, then why did Uncle Theodore spend 6 years buying it? Because, Miranda said softly, he was dying, and dying people do sentimental things. I opened the first manila folder with shaking hands, ignoring Miranda's condescending smile. Inside were bank statements, dozens of them, dating back 6 years. But these weren't Uncle Theodore's accounts. They were mine. Every deposit, every mysterious commission payment, every anonymous collector purchase was highlighted in yellow. But in the margins, Uncle Theodore had written notes in his careful script. Rothschild Gallery Commission, $2,400, told Sarah it was from Mrs. Hartwell. Boston Arts Festival piece, $1,800, Marcus arranged fake buyer story. My legs gave out and I sank onto the paint-splattered stool, spreading the documents across my lap. The evidence was overwhelming. Not just the fake art sales, but something much bigger. Investment portfolio management fees, $847,000, I read aloud from one statement. Healthcare coordination, $156,000. What is this? Marcus lunged forward and tried to grab the papers. Those are private medical expenses. From my trust fund, I whispered, reading the account header. This money came from my trust fund. The room went dead silent. Miranda's perfect composure finally cracked completely. Sarah, you don't have a trust fund, she said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. I pulled out more documents. Trust agreements. Investment statements. All bearing the name Sarah Elizabeth Chin Trust, established 1995. The balance on the most recent statement made my vision blur, $2.3 million. My grandmother left me money, I breathed. Just like she left Mom and Uncle Theodore. I've had a trust fund this entire time. Had, Marcus corrected grimly. Past tense. The next document explained everything. Transfer authorizations, all dated within the last 18 months, all bearing signatures that looked like mine but felt wrong somehow. The trust had been systematically emptied, transferred into accounts belonging to Blackwood Family Healthcare Services and Theodore Blackwood Medical Management LLC. You stole it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You've been stealing from my trust fund to pay for Uncle Theodore's care, then charging him separately for the same services. We managed Theodore's medical needs, Miranda said defensively. Do you know how much round-the-clock care costs? The physical therapy, the medications, the private nurses? With my money. Money I never even knew existed. I was shaking now, rage building in my chest like a physical force. How long have you known about this trust? Since you turned 18, Marcus admitted. Your parents signed management rights over to us when they thought you were too immature to handle that kind of financial responsibility. They were protecting you from yourself. My parents knew? They suggested it, Miranda said. You were dropping out of college, chasing impossible dreams, dating that musician with the tattoos. Everyone agreed you needed time to mature before accessing serious money. The betrayal hit me in waves. Not just my cousins, but my parents. They'd all conspired to hide my inheritance while I struggled to afford basic art supplies, while I worked double shifts at the cafe, while I ate ramen for weeks to buy decent brushes. The art sales were guilt money, I realized. You were stealing from my trust and throwing pennies back at me to keep me quiet. We were investing your money responsibly while ensuring you could pursue your passion without the pressure of sudden wealth, Miranda corrected. It was financial planning. I opened the second folder and found the real bombshell, forged documents. My signature on dozens of authorization forms I'd never seen, let alone signed. But these weren't just financial transfers. Medical directives putting Marcus in charge of Uncle Theodore's healthcare decisions. Power of attorney agreements giving Miranda control over his daily life. You isolated him, I said, pieces clicking together. Made him dependent on you, then used my money to pay for it while billing his estate separately. We took care of him, Marcus snapped. Where were you during his final months? We were there every day. Because you made sure no one else could get through. Catherine Whitfield said he tried to contact people but you intercepted everything. The third folder contained the evidence I needed, recorded phone calls, email printouts, and a handwritten journal in Uncle Theodore's careful script documenting their systematic isolation techniques. Medications adjusted without doctor approval. Visitors turned away. Phone calls blocked. And a copy of his real will, dated just 2 months ago, leaving me the house, the art collection, and half the estate. He tried to change everything, I whispered, scanning the legal document. This will leave Miranda and Marcus $50,000 each. As a final gesture of forgiveness for their manipulation. Miranda made a grab for the folder, but I clutched it against my chest and stood up, backing toward the window again. That document was invalidated, she said desperately. Theodore wasn't competent to make legal decisions in his final months. The medications affected his judgment. The medications you were controlling, I shot back. The same medications you used to keep him confused while you forged my signatures on trust fund transfers. My phone buzzed with a text, and Miranda's face went white when she saw me glance at it. Expecting someone? I asked, but I was already reading Jess's message. Asterisk police are here asking about suspicious activity at Theodore's house. Someone reported break-in sounds asterisk. The color drained from Miranda's face as she stared at my phone. You called the police? I didn't have to, I said, backing further toward the window. Through the glass, I could see 2 patrol cars pulling up to the house, their red and blue lights painting the late afternoon shadows. Looks like someone else reported suspicious activity. Marcus was already moving toward the door. We need to get downstairs and explain this before they come up here. Explain what? I clutched the folders tighter. That you've been systematically stealing from my trust fund for 6 years? That you forged my signature on dozens of documents? Or maybe how you isolated Uncle Theodore and kept him medicated so he couldn't change his will? Sarah, you don't understand the legal complexities, Miranda started. I understand theft, I interrupted. $2.3 million, Miranda. That's what my grandmother left me, and you've stolen almost all of it. Heavy footsteps echoed from the main staircase, followed by authoritative voices. Boston police. We're responding to a disturbance call. Miranda's panic was barely controlled now. Marcus, the safe. Close the safe. But I was already moving, snatching the small velvet box I'd noticed earlier before Marcus could reach it. Inside were keys, several of them, along with safety deposit box documentation for 3 different banks. More hiding places? I asked, holding up the keys. The footsteps were on the second floor now. Miranda grabbed Marcus's arm, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. They came in accounts. If she finds those records. What came in accounts? I demanded. Nothing, Marcus said quickly, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Sarah, we need to present a united front here. Family business should stay private. Family business, I repeated, scanning the safety deposit box keys. Each was labeled with an address and box number. Is that what you call international money laundering? We are not money laundering, Miranda hissed. We've been managing Theodore's assets across multiple jurisdictions for tax efficiency. It's completely legal. With forged signatures? Using my trust fund as your personal bank account? The police voices were closer now, checking rooms on the second floor. I could hear them calling out clear, as they moved through the house systematically. Marcus made a desperate lunge for the folders, but I was ready for him. I dodged toward the easel area, putting Uncle Theodore's paintings between us. Those documents are forgeries, he said desperately. Sarah's been having emotional problems since Theodore's death. She broke in here and created fake evidence to support some conspiracy theory. Really? I held up one of the trust fund statements. Then you won't mind explaining to the police why my signature on these transfer authorizations doesn't match my actual signature? Miranda's composure finally shattered completely. You ungrateful little bitch. Do you know what we could have done with Theodore's money? Real investments, proper portfolio management, actual wealth building? Instead, we had to waste it on your pathetic art hobby and his sentimental bullshit. There it is, I said quietly. The truth. Boston police. Third floor. The officers were coming up the narrow staircase now. I could hear their equipment jangling, their radio chatter about securing the scene. Miranda grabbed Marcus's hand. The service elevator, she whispered. We can get to the garage. Too late, I said, as the first officer appeared in the studio doorway. Officer Janet Rodriguez took in the scene with sharp, professional eyes, the open safe, the scattered documents, two people in expensive clothes looking guilty as hell, and me standing in the middle of it all holding manila folders like they contained the secrets of the universe. Ma'am, we received a call about a disturbance, she said, her hand resting casually on her radio. Can someone explain what's happening here? My cousins have been stealing from my trust fund, I said before Miranda or Marcus could speak. I have documentation of forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, and elder abuse. That's completely false, Miranda said, her polished persona snapping back into place like armor. Officer, I'm Miranda Blackwoodchin, and this house belongs to my brother and me. This woman broke in after our uncle's memorial service and has been going through private family documents. Rodriguez looked between us, clearly trying to assess the situation. Ma'am, she said to me, do you have permission to be in this house? I'm family, I said. And these documents prove they've been stealing from me for years. Marcus stepped forward, his voice taking on that authoritative tone that had always made adults believe him when we were kids. Officer, my cousin has been struggling emotionally since our uncle's death. She's making wild accusations based on documents she can't properly understand. This is a family matter that should be handled privately. But Rodriguez was studying the studio around us, taking in the wall of paintings, the art supplies, the obvious signs of recent use. Her expression sharpened when she noticed the open safe behind the portrait. Whose safe is that? She asked. Our deceased uncle's, Miranda said quickly. We were securing valuable items when Sarah broke in and started making accusations. I didn't break in. I had a key. I pulled out Uncle Theodore's ornate key, the one that had started this whole discovery. He left this to me specifically in his will. Rodriguez called for backup and started taking statements, but I could see Miranda and Marcus exchanging glances. They were planning something, and I had the sinking feeling that 3 folders of evidence might not be enough to prove 6 years of systematic theft. That's when my phone rang. Catherine Whitfield's name appeared on the screen, and I remembered her words from the memorial. Theodore often spoke about legacy. Mrs. Whitfield? I answered, putting the call on speaker before Miranda could object. Sarah, dear, I'm so glad you found Theodore's studio. He'd been hoping you would, especially after what those cousins of his put him through. The silence in the studio was deafening. Officer Rodriguez stepped closer, her eyebrows raised at hearing Catherine's voice through my phone speaker. Miranda's face had gone completely white. Mrs. Whitfield, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, you're on speaker. I'm here with the police and my cousins. Perfect timing, then. Sarah, I've been Theodore's estate attorney for the past 2 months, ever since he fired Whitmore and Associates. He suspected Miranda and Marcus were intercepting his legal communications, so he came to me through a mutual friend at the museum board. Marcus stepped forward aggressively. That's impossible. Theodore wasn't competent to change legal representation. His medical records show medication levels that were completely inappropriate for his condition. Catherine's crisp voice cut through his protest. I had the independent medical evaluation he requested, along with video recordings of our meetings. Theodore was sharp as a tack when he wasn't being overmedicated by his so-called caregivers. Rodriguez pulled out a notebook. Ma'am, can you verify your identity and explain your involvement here? Catherine Whitfield, attorney at law, Massachusetts Bar number 47291. I represent Theodore Blackwood's actual estate, not the forgeries these two presented to Whitmore's office. Sarah, the documents you found should include copies of the real will dated October 15th. I shuffled through the papers with shaking hands. Yes, it's here. Leaving me the house, art collection, and primary estate. That will is invalid, Miranda snapped, her composure completely shattered now. Theodore was under the influence of prescription medications. We have medical testimony. From Dr. Harrison Mills, who's currently under investigation by the medical board for prescription fraud, Catherine interrupted smoothly. The same Dr. Mills who was receiving monthly payments from your healthcare management company for services never rendered. Rodriguez looked up from her notebook. Ma'am, are you saying there's evidence of medical fraud? Among other things. Sarah, check the bottom of the second folder. There should be bank records showing payments to Mills, along with pharmaceutical receipts for medications Theodore never actually received. I found the documents, my hands trembling as I scanned the evidence. $47,000 in payments to Dr. Mills over 18 months. And purchase orders for medications that were never delivered to Uncle Theodore? We were stockpiling his prescriptions for emergencies, Marcus said desperately. Managing his care required planning ahead. You were selling prescription medications while keeping Theodore overmedicated on cheaper alternatives, I realized, reading through the pharmaceutical invoices. The expensive heart medication he needed? You bought it, then sold it to online pharmacies while giving him generic versions that weren't working properly. Rodriguez was writing furiously now. Sir, I need to advise you that anything you say can be used against you in court. Mrs. Whitfield, I said into the phone, how much money are we talking about total? From what Theodore and I calculated before his death. Including the trust fund theft, the double billing for medical services, the prescription fraud, and the unauthorized estate transfers? Approximately $4.7 million. The number hit the room like a physical blow. Even Officer Rodriguez looked stunned. Miranda made a desperate grab for my phone, but Rodriguez stepped between us. Ma'am, step back. Nobody touch anything else until we get detectives down here. Sarah, Catherine's voice continued through the speaker. Theodore recorded video messages for you during our final meeting. He suspected he might not live long enough to see justice done himself. Would you like me to send those to the officers? I looked at Miranda and Marcus, both of whom appeared to be calculating escape routes. Yes, please. I think Uncle Theodore deserves to tell his own story. Rodriguez called for additional units and a detective team. As she spoke into her radio about financial crimes and elder abuse, I realized this was just the beginning. The safety deposit boxes, the Cayman accounts Miranda had mentioned, whatever other evidence Uncle Theodore had been gathering, it was all still out there, waiting to be discovered. The key in my pocket suddenly felt less like a burden and more like exactly what Uncle Theodore had intended it to be, the first step toward justice. 2 hours later, the studio looked like a crime scene from a financial thriller. Detective Maria Santos had arrived with a team of forensic accountants, and they'd spread Uncle Theodore's hidden documents across every available surface. The wall of my painting served as a backdrop to the systematic dismantling of my cousin's 6-year fraud operation. Mrs. Chen, Detective Santos said, looking up from a laptop where she'd been reviewing Catherine Whitfield's video files, your uncle was remarkably thorough. These recordings span the last 4 months of his life, and they detail everything. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor next to Uncle Theodore's easel, still clutching the velvet box of safety deposit keys. Miranda and Marcus had been read their rights an hour ago and were currently sitting in separate patrol cars outside, but I could see through the window that Miranda was on her phone, probably calling the family's high-powered attorney. What did he say in the videos? I asked. Santos turned the laptop toward me. Uncle Theodore's face filled the screen, looking friendlier than I remembered but with eyes that were sharp and alert. The timestamp showed the recording was made just 3 weeks before his death. Sarah, if you're watching this, then Catherine was right about Miranda and Marcus escalating their timeline. I'm recording this on October 28th, and I want you to know that every decision they claim I made while incompetent was actually me playing along while gathering evidence. His voice was stronger than I'd heard it in months. No slurred speech, no confusion, just the sharp, articulate man I remembered from my childhood. The key I'm leaving you opens more than just the studio safe. Safety deposit box 247 at First National contains the original documents from your grandmother's will. She left specific instructions that your trust fund was never to be managed by Miranda or Marcus, but your parents were told those instructions were suggestions, not legal requirements. I paused the video and looked at Detective Santos. My parents don't know about the legal requirements? According to what we've found so far, no. Your cousins presented them with modified versions of the trust documents. Your parents genuinely believed they were protecting you from premature wealth. Santos pulled out a thick file. But the original trust specified that you should have had access to the income starting at age 21, and full control at 25. I'm 28. Which means you should have been receiving approximately $85,000 annually in income distributions for 7 years, plus the principal balance of $2.3 million as of your 25th birthday. I did quick math in my head. That's over $3 million they've stolen from me, not counting interest. Santos nodded grimly. And that's just your trust. We found evidence that they've been doing similar manipulations with other family members. Your cousin Rebecca in Seattle? She thinks her trust fund was depleted by medical school expenses, but we found transfers to the same Cayman accounts. My stomach dropped. Rebecca was my second cousin, the daughter of Uncle Theodore's late brother. She'd struggled through medical school working 3 jobs, believing the family money was gone. How many of us are there? So far? 5 family members across 2 generations. Total theft appears to be somewhere around $12 million. Before I could fully process that number, my phone rang. Rebecca's name appeared on the screen, which seemed like impossible timing until I realized Detective Santos had probably already contacted her. Sarah? Rebecca's voice was shaky. I just got a call from a detective in Boston. Is it true? About the trust funds? I put her on speaker with Santos's permission. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I just found out myself a few hours ago. My trust fund wasn't depleted for medical school. Santos leaned toward the phone. Ms. Chen, Detective Santos here. Your educational expenses were legitimate distributions, but they should have been a fraction of your trust balance. According to our preliminary investigation, you should currently have approximately $800,000 in accessible funds. Silence stretched across the connection before Rebecca started crying. I've been working 70-hour weeks as a resident because I thought I had to pay back family loans. Sarah, they told me the money was gone and I'd have to work off the debt. What family loans? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. Miranda said the family covered my medical school costs as an advance against my inheritance, and I'd need to pay it back with interest before I could access anything else. I'd been sending them $2,000 a month for 3 years. Santos was writing furiously. Ms. Chen, we're going to need those payment records. This suggests the fraud is much more extensive than we initially thought. Through the studio window, I watched Miranda's animated phone conversation grow more agitated. She was gesturing wildly, and even from 3 stories up I could see the desperation in her body language. Rebecca, I said carefully, have you talked to any other cousins lately? Alex in Portland? Jamie in Miami? Alex called me last month asking if I knew anything about trust fund distributions. He'd been trying to access his for months, but Miranda kept telling him the paperwork was delayed due to market volatility. Santos looked up from her notes. How many family members are we talking about total? I closed my eyes and mentally catalogued Uncle Theodore's extended family. At least 8 cousins in my generation, plus 3 in the generation above us who lost parents early. If Miranda and Marcus have been pulling this scam on everyone, we could be looking at the largest family trust fraud in Massachusetts history, Santos finished grimly. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, *, this is Alex Portland. Rebecca gave me your number. Just got call from Boston police. WTF is happening with the trust funds, *. Then another text from a different unknown number, * Jamie Miami here. Alex said to contact you. Police called about Miranda and Marcus. Are we finally getting answers, *. I showed the messages to Santos, who immediately started making calls to coordinate with other jurisdictions. As she spoke to officers in Portland and Miami, I realized Uncle Theodore's key hadn't just unlocked a studio safe, it had opened the door to exposing a fraud that had been systematically destroying our entire extended family's financial security for years. And based on the increasingly frantic phone conversations I could see Miranda having in the patrol car, she was just beginning to understand how thoroughly Uncle Theodore had documented everything. The detective's phone rang, and I watched her expression darken as she listened to whoever was on the other end. When she hung up, she turned to me with a look that made my stomach clench. That was Detective Morrison in Miami. Your cousin Jamie's situation is complicated. What do you mean complicated? Santos pulled up a new file on her laptop. Jamie thought her trust fund was being held up due to probate issues with her mother's estate. But Miranda convinced her to sign power of attorney documents last year, supposedly to expedite the process. Jamie's been living in a studio apartment working retail while Miranda's been systematically emptying her accounts. I felt sick. How much? 1.8 million, gone over the past 14 months. But here's the worst part, Jamie's mother left her more than money. There was a house in Coral Gables worth about 3 million that was supposed to transfer to Jamie when she turned 25. She turned 26 last month. My phone immediately rang. Jamie's number. Sarah, please tell me the police are wrong about the house. Jamie's voice was barely controlled panic. My mom's house. Miranda said it had to be sold to pay estate taxes. She said there was nothing left after the government took their share. Jamie, I'm so sorry. There weren't any estate taxes owed. Miranda and Marcus have been stealing from all of us. The house sold 6 months ago for 3.2 million, Santos added, speaking toward my phone. The money went into an account controlled by Blackwood Family Asset Management, which is a shell company registered to your cousins. The silence on Jamie's end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I drove by Mom's house last month. The new owners had completely remodeled it. They were having a pool party in the backyard where Mom used to grow her orchids. Jamie started crying. I sat in my car for an hour thinking about how proud Mom would have been that her house was making another family happy. And the whole time, Miranda had just sold it. Like it meant nothing. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another call. Rebecca, calling back. Sarah, I've been thinking about something. Last year, Miranda insisted I sign some documents updating my address for trust correspondence. But looking back, I don't think that's all those papers were. Santos immediately perked up. What kind of documents? She said it was routine paperwork, address changes, and beneficiary updates. But she kept saying to sign here and here without really letting me read everything. I was in the middle of my surgical rotation, exhausted, and I just trusted her. Rebecca, this is Detective Santos. We need you to try to remember everything you can about those documents. Were there multiple pages? Did you initial anything besides signature lines? There were. God, maybe 8 or 9 pages? She said most of it was legal language I wouldn't understand anyway. But now I'm wondering if I signed more than address updates. Santos was already typing notes. We'll need you to come to Boston as soon as possible. If you signed additional authorizations unknowingly, it changes the scope of the fraud significantly. Through the window, I could see that Miranda's phone conversation had ended, and now Marcus was making an animated call from the second patrol car. Both of them looked increasingly desperate, and I wondered who they were calling for help. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized, Catherine Whitfield. Sarah, dear, I'm afraid we have a problem. I just received a very concerning call from Miranda's attorney. They're claiming that all the documents Theodore left you are forgeries, and they filed an emergency injunction to freeze all estate assets pending a competency review of Theodore's final months. The words hit me like ice water. Can they do that? They're certainly trying. Their lawyer is arguing that the video recordings were made under duress, and they have Dr. Mills prepared to testify that Theodore was heavily medicated and susceptible to manipulation during the time period in question. Santos grabbed the phone from my hand. Ms. Whitfield, this is Detective Santos with Boston PD. Are you saying they're trying to claim the victim was incompetent while simultaneously using him to commit fraud? Exactly. It's a desperate legal maneuver, but if it works even temporarily, it could tie up all the evidence and assets for months while they move money offshore. I looked at the safety deposit box key still clutched in my palm. What about the other evidence? The bank records, the original trust documents? That's our ace in the hole, Catherine said. But only if we can access those safety deposit boxes before the injunction takes effect. The order was filed an hour ago, and it could be processed as early as Monday morning. Santos checked her watch. It's Friday at 6 p.m. Banks are closed until Monday. Not the main First National branch downtown. They have extended weekend hours for estate matters. But we'd need to move quickly. I stood up, Uncle Theodore's keys cutting into my palm. Then let's go. Whatever Uncle Theodore hid in those boxes, Miranda and Marcus are terrified of it getting out. Santos was already calling for a squad car. Ms. Whitfield, we'll meet you at the bank in 30 minutes. And ma'am? Bring every piece of identification you have for Theodore's estate. If this is our only shot, we need to make it count. The drive to First National Bank felt like a funeral procession, but instead of mourning Uncle Theodore, I was mourning my entire understanding of my family. Detective Santos rode in the passenger seat while I gripped the steering wheel, the safety deposit box keys burning a hole in my jacket pocket. Your cousins made bail 20 minutes ago, Santos said, checking her phone. Their attorney posted $200,000 cash for each of them. My stomach clenched. They're out? With GPS monitoring and surrendered passports. But Sarah, people with their resources and connections. She didn't need to finish. Miranda and Marcus weren't going to sit quietly while we unraveled their fraud. Catherine Whitfield was waiting outside the bank's imposing granite facade when we arrived, her silver hair whipping in the October wind. Even at 70-something, she moved with the sharp precision of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. The injunction hearing is scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m., she said without preamble. Judge Harrison is presiding, and he's known for taking a dim view of family financial disputes. If Miranda's attorney can convince him that Theodore was incompetent, everything gets frozen for months. Santos badged her way past bank security, explaining the situation to a manager who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on a Friday evening. We need access to box 247 under the Theodore Blackwood estate, she said. We have probable cause to believe it contains evidence of ongoing financial crimes. The manager, a nervous man named Peterson, led us through multiple security doors into the vault area. Mr. Blackwood was very specific about access protocols, he said, consulting his computer. Only family members with proper identification and the physical key. I pulled out Uncle Theodore's ornate key, and Peterson nodded. Box 247 is in the private viewing area. We can give you 30 minutes before we close. The safety deposit box was larger than I'd expected, more like a filing cabinet drawer than the small boxes I'd seen in movies. When Peterson left us alone in the sterile viewing room, I inserted both keys and turned them with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Inside were 3 sealed envelopes marked Sarah, opened first, police evidence, and emergency contact Alex Hartley. Who's Alex Hartley? Santos asked. Catherine's face went pale. Theodore's accountant. The one Miranda and Marcus claimed had died in a car accident last year. I ripped open the first envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter in Uncle Theodore's handwriting, but also a small digital camera and what looked like a USB drive. Asterisk Sarah, if you're reading this, then Catherine successfully guided you to the truth. But what you've discovered so far is only the beginning. The camera contains video recordings I made secretly over the past 8 months, footage of Miranda and Marcus discussing their plans, admitting to the forgeries, and detailing their offshore accounts. Asterisk. Asterisk, the USB drive has copies of everything, but also access codes to the Cayman banking system where they've been moving the stolen money. Alex Hartley is not dead, he's been in hiding since discovering their fraud, and he has the original accounting records they thought they destroyed. Asterisk. Asterisk, but Sarah, you need to know something else. This isn't just about our family's money. They've been using our trust funds as collateral for much larger investment schemes. If their house of cards collapses, it could take down 3 other prominent Boston families who invested with them unknowingly. Asterisk. Asterisk, the emergency contact envelope contains Alex's real location and instructions for accessing an additional safety deposit box in Cambridge. He is evidence of securities fraud involving over $50 million. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm sorry you had to carry this burden, but you're the only one they never suspected. Use what I've given you to not just get our money back, but to make sure they never destroy another family. Asterisk. Detective Santos was reading over my shoulder, her expression growing darker with each paragraph. 50 million in securities fraud? Sarah, this isn't just family drama anymore. We're looking at federal crimes. I picked up the small digital camera with trembling fingers. The LCD screen showed dozens of recorded files, each dated and timestamped over the past 8 months. I clicked on the most recent one, dated just 2 weeks before Uncle Theodore's death. Miranda's voice filled the small viewing room, crystal clear through the camera speaker. The Hartford family invested another $8 million last week. They have no idea we're using their money to cover the gaps from the Chin Trust extractions. Marcus's voice responded, how long can we keep this up? If Theodore lives much longer, someone's going to start asking questions about his medical expenses. Theodore won't be a problem much longer, Miranda replied, and something in her tone made my blood freeze. Dr. Mills adjusted his medication dosages again yesterday. His heart can't take much more stress. The camera slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the metal table. The recording kept playing as I stared at the camera in horror. Miranda's voice, cold and calculating, the insurance policies we took out on Theodore last year will cover any natural complications from his declining health. Detective Santos immediately called for backup while Catherine frantically dialed someone on her phone. But all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears as I realized Uncle Theodore hadn't just died from illness, my cousins had slowly murdered him while stealing millions from our entire family. Sarah, Santos said urgently, we need to get this evidence to federal investigators immediately. And we need to find Alex Hartley before Miranda and Marcus figure out he's alive. I opened the emergency contact envelope with shaking hands. Inside was an address in Cambridge and a note, asterisk Alex has been hiding at St. Mary's Rectory under the name Thomas Allen. Father Mackenzie has been protecting him since Miranda's people tried to run him off the road last November. Box 891 at Cambridge Trust contains the Hartford family evidence and records of at least 12 other investment victims, asterisk. 12 other families, I whispered. They've been doing this to everyone. Catherine finished her phone call and turned to us grimly. I just spoke to Judge Harrison's clerk. The emergency injunction has been fast-tracked to tonight. Miranda's attorney convinced them there's risk of evidence tampering. We have until midnight before everything gets frozen. Santos was already moving toward the door. Peterson. We need those documents copied immediately, and I need to contact the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. As bank employees rushed to photocopy everything from the safety deposit box, my phone exploded with calls and texts from cousins across the country. Word was spreading through our extended family like wildfire, and everyone was starting to realize how extensively they'd been robbed. Jamie from Miami, asterisk found the fake estate tax documents in my mom's papers. They forged official IRS letterhead, asterisk. Alex from Portland, asterisk Miranda called me an hour ago threatening legal action if I talk to police. She's panicking, asterisk. Rebecca, asterisk flying to Boston tonight. Bring everyone down with me, asterisk. But it was the text from an unknown number that made my blood run cold, asterisk this is Alex Hartley. I just saw the news reports. Miranda knows I'm alive now. They're coming for me, asterisk. Detective Santos. I thrust my phone toward her. Alex Hartley just texted me. Miranda knows he survived. Santos immediately radioed for units to be dispatched to St. Mary's Rectory while I tried calling Alex back. The phone rang straight to voicemail. Catherine grabbed my arm. Sarah, there's something else. The USB drive your uncle left, it's not just banking access codes. Theodore hacked into Miranda and Marcus's personal communications over the past year. Email accounts, text messages, even recorded phone calls with their offshore banking contacts. I plugged the USB drive into Peterson's computer terminal, and hundreds of files populated the screen. Email threads discussing liquidating the Theodore problem. Text messages about transferring money to accounts in 3 different countries. And most damning of all, a recorded conversation between Miranda and someone named Victor discussing permanent solutions to loose ends. Victor Kozlov, Santos said grimly, reading over the file names. He's a known associate of several organized crime financial operations. Sarah, your cousins weren't just stealing from your family, they've been laundering money for very dangerous people. The bank's security alarm suddenly blared through the building. Peterson rushed back to our viewing room, his face white with panic. Someone just tried to breach our main vault door. Security cameras show 2 individuals who match the police description of Miranda and Marcus Blackwood. Santos drew her weapon and spoke rapidly into her radio. All units to First National Bank downtown. Suspects are on premises and considered extremely dangerous. Through the viewing room's small window, I could see emergency lights flashing in the bank's main lobby. But Miranda and Marcus weren't trying to escape, they were trying to reach us, to destroy the evidence that would expose not just their fraud, but their connections to violent criminals who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate witnesses. The Cambridge safety deposit box, I said urgently. If they destroy Alex Hartley and those records dash. Already on it, Santos interrupted, coordinating with multiple agencies through her radio. FBI has teams moving to secure the Hartford family evidence, and U.S. Marshals are en route to Alex's location. My phone rang one final time. Catherine Whitfield's number. Sarah, it's over, she said, her voice filled with something that sounded like relief. Judge Harrison just issued arrest warrants for Miranda and Marcus on federal racketeering charges. The injunction has been reversed, and all family assets are being placed in protected trust pending restitution proceedings. Through the bank's windows, I watched my cousins being led away in handcuffs as FBI agents secure the building. In the distance, news vans were already arriving to cover what reporters would later call the largest family trust fraud in New England history. Uncle Theodore's ornate key felt warm in my palm as I realized he'd given me much more than access to hidden evidence. He'd given me the power to save not just our family, but 12 others who'd been victimized by Miranda and Marcus's expanding criminal enterprise. The key had unlocked the truth. And the truth, finally, had set us all free.